Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing today? So, you know how when you come to one of my videos and I don't do my intro, and then you guys are like, okay, this is going to be a serious video? This is going to be a serious video. I have watched several videos, done my research, read this article twice, and I have some things to say about it. I have taken very lengthy notes. This will probably be a long video, a video that I think is important to make, talking about James Charles. So let me kind of give you the background to how this all came about. So last night I went to bed very, very early. I've been having a really hard time getting sleep lately. And last night I laid down at about 10:30 and fell right asleep. Slept through the entire night. Got very restful sleep last night. Woke up this morning. I felt awesome when I woke up. Got up before my husband was even getting ready for work. And so I didn't want to disturb him while he was still sleeping, so I came downstairs, got some coffee, came outside, did my prayers and my meditations as I usually do, and then asked myself, are you ready to start the day? And I was ready to start my day, so I got on my phone, and I started looking through, social media, and on Instagram, I was like getting linked to this article on Cosmopolitan that had been written about James Charles. And I was like, what is this? Because the article is titled, James Charles would like to be uncanceled, please. And I was like, okay, this is fantastic, right? Amidst the allegations of Colleen Ballinger, of which myself and many other people are also talking about James Charles and how James Charles has continued to be able to have a thriving career, even though he has had very similar allegations in the past, and has continued 3 years later with the enablement of his friends and a lot of people that have just kind of acted like, who, what, we don't really care about what happened to James Charles. James Charles has continued to have a thriving career. Now, the reason why I bring this up in regards to Colleen Ballinger is that I have made several videos in the past talking about Colleen Ballinger, as have many other people, talking about the allegations surrounding her right now. And I have said that if we do not continue to talk about it, if we do not continue to hold Colleen Ballinger accountable, then what happened to James Charles will happen to Colleen Ballinger, and that she will continue to have a career, that the victims' stories will be forgotten, and that years later, people won't even know what was Colleen Ballinger ever accused of to begin with, right? Which is very, very interesting, because before I even get into this article, I want to go to a quote of herself, the author of the article, which we're going to talk about in just a second, because I feel that this author is extremely problematic, okay? She is basically giving James Charles an out of all, and she is also enabling him to be able to come back and have another chance again, right? And not have to really fully address these allegations. Not to mention, she didn't fully do her research, which if you're going to write an article and you are going to kind of diminish the victim stories and you are going to allow James Charles to have an out of his allegations from years ago, from 2019, then you should probably do your research, okay? If not, and you are doing an article which is somewhat, I believe, in defense of James Charles, then you are either biased or you are standing on the side of somebody that has these allegations, okay? Needless to say, she puts in quotes, she puts in a huge bold print this quote: when I polled friends and colleagues about Charles in the run-up to this day, the general consensus was that he had done something bad, but no one was clear on exactly what. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up this article was because after I read the article twice, I decided to go back and watch his Holding Myself Accountable video, as well as his Open Conversation video, 2 videos that he did addressing this topic. And as I was watching the first video, my neighbor from next door walked over. She's 30 years old. She just turned 30 this week. Happy birthday. And she was walking her dog, and she was laughing because she knows what I do for a living, that I, do drama videos and things like that. And she was laughing, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, she goes, you're up early this morning watching these videos. And I said, yeah, I'm watching this video. I'm incited about this article that I read from Cosmopolitan. I cannot believe that this woman gave James Charles an out in all of this. And she was like, oh, James Charles, your article's about James Charles. Now, mind you, okay, My neighbor is not a beauty influencer. She doesn't watch many YouTube. She watches Games of Thrones and she reads books all day long. She's not in the world. She doesn't know a lot about fashion or beauty or anything like that, right? She walks her dog and she lives a pretty normal life, okay? And I said, yeah, James Charles. Do you know who James Charles is? She said, absolutely, I know who James Charles is. How could you not? And I said, well, it's interesting. And I read her the quote. Let's read the quote again. When I polled friends and colleagues about Charles in the run-up to this day, the general consensus was that he had done something bad, but no one was clear on exactly what. And so I read her the quote and I said, do you know what James Charles' allegations were about? And she said, yeah, he had allegations of grooming, correct? Now, explain to me, okay, that this author, who is an attorney, okay, and has written a book, and is in New York City, allegedly, and has, you know, worked around all of these people, her friends and colleagues have no clue as to what James Charles has done, but she chooses to write an article about James Charles. My neighbor living in Indianapolis, Indiana, okay, keeping to herself, watching Game of Thrones and reading books all day long, she knows what the allegations are about James Charles, but this woman doesn't, and she chose to write an article about James Charles in defense of James Charles, okay? So ask me if I'm pissed. Yes, I'm pissed about this, okay? So I read this whole article, and there are certain pieces that I want to talk about. But let me just read you the synopsis at the beginning of this article. James Charles would like to be uncanceled, please. More than 2 years after allegations of sexual impropriety sent the superstar beauty YouTuber into influencer purgatory, he's hoping to relaunch himself and his brand because he has his launch coming out, I think, this week or next. And so this is his attempt at trying to save his career, right? With the help of a new makeup line. In a wide-ranging interview with Cosmopolitan, Charles talks about effing up and trying to move on. And this is by Gabrielle Bluestone, okay? So when you go to the very bottom and you read Gabrielle Bluestone's her bio, she says in here, Gabrielle Bluestone is a journalist who apparently doesn't have the need to watch back both of these videos, his Holding Myself Accountability video and the Open Conversation video. I did, and many of the things that she says and states that he says in the interview, he contradicts himself in the videos, which she would know had she watched the videos, and she would state in her research as a journalist article, but she doesn't. And an attorney from New York whose writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, New York Magazine, and Gawker, among others. She is the Emmy-nominated executive producer of Netflix Fry and the associate producer of Different Flowers, winner of the 2017 Kansas City Film Festival Prize. Her first book, Hype, was published in 2021. So, needless to say, this woman, okay, has a broad history of doing research and journalism, okay, and has been awarded for that as well, right? So the fact that she chooses to do this article about James Charles, basically giving him an out, okay, and to me, to some degree, you can read the article, but to some degree, kind of victim blaming the people that came forward against James Charles, and I'm going to only reference the two people that James Charles actually holds himself accountable for. The rest of all of the allegations, that many of which are fake, and I have addressed in many of my videos and said that there's problems with fake allegations because they diminish the stories of the true victims, okay, which James Charles himself says in his Open Conversation video, which she would know, okay? But no, she chooses to go in and she doesn't really talk much about the allegations. She references them, okay? But what she really talks about at one point is how one of the victims comes out and apologizes to James Charles in a DM, okay, about lying to him about his age. At that time, that victim was 16 years old. That was 4 or 5 years ago, right? So he's now 20 or 21. And she chooses to use that as her point to excuse James Charles. I just was like, I can't believe this. So she goes in here and she says, it is the year of our internet, 2023, and as surely as the sun rises, an internet celebrity has an apology to make. So she goes on about this whole thing, okay? Now, I'm going to go in with the screenshots of the parts that I took, okay, from her article that I want to address. So she goes in and she says that first article, but, so she goes into this thing and says, where she's talking about the screenshots of the allegations. And some of the screenshots depicted consensual conversations between adults, he says. Others were completely fake and never even happened. Charles has never been legally charged with engaging inappropriately with a minor, let alone proven to have knowingly done so. Well, actually, he did come out in a video called Holding Myself Accountable, which he took took down, even though in the open conversation video, which she also talks about in her article, he does say that he had inappropriate conversations with minors, that he just didn't know that their age, that he could have easily checked their age had he looked at their social media pages, and he would have known their age. So it was his lack of doing research that led him to have conversations with minors. He says that in his video, okay? So when she says that he was, let alone proven to have knowingly done so, he proved it by admitting to it. So I don't know how she can say that in here. Nevertheless, that April, Charles uploaded a 14-minute YouTube video entitled Holding Myself Accountable, which he has taken down. She doesn't mention that, where he admitted to inadvertently exchanging messages with two 16-year-old boys he said he was led to believe were 18. Led to believe because he didn't do his research and look on his own, on their social media, which he says in the video that she doesn't mention in here, okay? And he apologized for his desperate behavior. So then it goes on, and she says, let us begin. And then this is a quote. I don't want to sit here and fucking mope and whine and cry because nobody wants to hear it, says Charles, sinking into a plush couch in his casual open living room, which most 24-year-olds have plush couches in their open living room in their farmhouse that she describes as looking like the Kardashians. Most 24-year-olds have those kind of homes, right? Okay. So he said, I had to do a lot of thinking, like, okay, babe, this is your fault. No, you're not a pedophile. No, you're not an effing groomer, which we're going to get to in a second because she cites a definition from a website that I actually went to, and she didn't do her full research on that definition as well. No, you're not a predator, but you made a big mistake. Okay, is what he says. Cosmopolitan reached out to many people, or to multiple people who said they were minors at the time of their exchanges with Charles. One asked if we would be willing to pay and did not reply again. They're like 20 years old, okay? Why you had to mention that in there, that, like, this is the thing, okay? Is, you know, you guys want to excuse James Charles for being 19, 20, he was 20 years old when these allegations came out, right? Okay, but now the victims, the two victims that he talks about in there, right? Okay, if they were 16 at the time, you know, they are now 20 years old, okay? But we're going to hold them to a higher standard than we held James Charles to at that time that he was doing inappropriate things, working in a professional world, making $10 million a year that she cites in here. We're going to hold these 16-year-olds that are now 20, okay? We're going to hold them to a higher standard than we should have held James Charles. Do you think James Charles would have done an interview 4 years ago for not getting paid? Please, okay? What's James Charles' payment for being in this interview? His payment for being in this interview is to uncancel himself and to boost his launch of his new makeup line, which you talk extensively about in your article, okay? So James Charles is greatly being paid for this interview. Do you not believe that his victims should be paid for sharing their story and going through their traumatic experience again? I guess not. I guess you don't think that's worthy of this article, okay? So anyway, one asked if we would be willing to pay and did not reply again when told our publication does not compensate sources for interviews, okay? But another former accuser wrote back via Instagram DM with a new revelation. He said, already privately apologized to Charles a few months ago for telling him I was 18 a few years ago, and that TikTok blew up, and that he lied about his, TikTok I made that blew the situation up. When asked to elaborate, the person did not reply. Charles' team says someone did message Charles that spring admitting he lied about the age. We already knew that. Okay? That was very nice of that young man to come out and apologize to James Charles. He didn't have to do that. James Charles used his power, okay, as being an influencer to engage with these people. Alright? Another thing that she makes excuses about, because she says, if a celebrity with tens of millions of followers came sliding into your DMs, would you respond? I probably would. Yes, okay, absolutely. And then she goes on to defend James Charles. Charles says he recognizes the power imbalance at play in his interactions online. He should have verified everyone's ages, he says, and have been more sensitive to how his fame could color the way others responded to him. Oh, I absolutely did F up, he says, but he denies that he ever engaged in grooming, a practice defined, and this is where she defends him, okay? A practice defined by the anti-sexual violence organization RAINN, R-A-I-N-N, as manipulative behaviors that an abuser uses to gain access to a potential victim, coerce them to agree to the abuse, and reduce the risk of being caught. Okay? Charles continues, I feel like that word is very popular buzzword right now, especially in politics and stuff, but the actual meaning of it has been so misconstrued. Referring to the first allegation against him, he adds, okay? An allegation that he held himself accountable for and said that he actually did, okay? It's not just an allegation anymore. It's a proven fact that he came forward and said he was having inappropriate conversations with minors that he could have done the research on. He didn't know their age, okay? The conversation lasted 1 hour. I don't know this person. I've never met this person. Which in his open conversation video, he didn't say 1 hour. He said hours, days, or weeks. She didn't do her research. She let him let this slide. Nothing happened between me and this actual person, so the use of that word is so categorically incorrect, okay? Well, I went to go look up this definition on this RAIN organization, which you can too, okay? And it says grooming, know the warning signs. Here's my proof to you, okay? RAIN, right at the top. The same website that she used for her definition. Sexual assault, grooming, know the warning signs, okay? One tool common to those who sexually abuse kids is grooming. Manipulative behaviors that the abuser uses to gain access to a potential victim, coerce them to agree to the abuse and reduce the risk of being caught. While these tactics are used most often against younger kids, teens and vulnerable adults are also at risk. That was her definition she used. She didn't choose to read any further, okay? Grooming can take place online or in person. So when he says in there, we never met and did anything, well, it says on here, online. It's usually employed by a family member or someone else in the victim's circle of trust. So a person that is a power differential, a YouTuber that you look up to, would probably be a person of trust, such as a coach, teacher, youth group leader, or others who naturally have some interaction with the victim, okay? Though grooming can take on many different forms, it often follows a similar pattern, and they give you warning signs. Victim selection. Abusers often observe possible victims and select them based on their ease of access to them or their perceived vulnerability, which James Charles talks about his accessibility to these people, okay? Gaining access and isolating the victim. Abusers will attempt to physically or emotionally separate a victim from those protecting them and often seek out positions in which they have contact with minors, okay? Again, he did that. Trust development and keeping secrets. Again, he does that. Desensitization to touch and discussion of sexual topics, which James Charles has already told us that he was having inappropriate conversations with these people, okay? And then it goes on. So she chose to read the definition, but didn't choose to talk about the parts of it can be online and whatever to give James Charles an out, okay? That's what she did. She chose to use that definition in defense of James Charles, which I think is so effed up and disgusting, okay? Let alone from a journalist, not to mention somebody that is a self-proclaimed attorney that has won awards. Are you kidding me? Like, I am so incensed about this whole situation. Okay, so then he goes on to say, it says, his YouTube page was demonetized, which I'm still confused as to why Colleen Ballinger, YouTube hasn't taken any action when James Charles was, and his allegations didn't even have to do with his YouTube channel. Now, I was told, okay, by somebody in a comment or a message that they knew somebody that worked at Google, or they used to work at Google, and that Colleen Ballinger, maybe it was a tweet, I don't know, but Colleen Ballinger, her channel and what they're going to do with their channels is under investigation by YouTube, and that it's going to be happening very swiftly and very soon on YouTube, and that they are going to be making actions, and when that happens, that Netflix will also probably take action soon after that. But until that happens, I don't know, okay? His YouTube page was just demonetized. He did not return as the host of Instant Influencer, of which he gets in a video and explain, and in the episode of Instant Influencer, which, yes, I watched, he explains how to make an apology in there, okay, and makes himself cry. And his other business ventures languish. He and Morphe, an influencer-focused beauty brand with which he partnered on an eyeshadow palette and brushes, cut ties. Charles' team says this was done at their own request after they saw Morphe getting backlash for associating with Charles. Charles told me he pocketed a small amount from the deal that allowed him to buy his house and pay off his parents' mortgage. One estimate put his total loss of income in the millions. Okay, and then it goes on to talk about his coping mechanisms. It was the first time where I was like, oh, F, I actually don't know what to do here. I eventually got to the point where I was like, this is not healthy, this is not good. This is getting to a really dark place, okay? The fallout became deeply personal when his younger brother, all right? Now, he talks in here about having, you know, dark thoughts about not going on and things like that, which I'm not going to say in a YouTube video because I don't like that word, okay? And at that time, I even came out in a video and I said, I don't want James Charles to hurt himself. I don't want him to do anything bad. I hope he's getting the help he needs, okay? In her article, she talks about how he has met with counselors. I went back and watched both videos. In both videos, he never once mentions the word counselor. He talks about how he's going to talk about how he's worked on this behind the scenes. He never once says, I met with a counselor, therapist, life coach, passions coach, career coach. No, he doesn't ever say that word, okay? At the beginning of his open conversation video, he says that in the other video, he says he's going to explain all the work he's done behind the scenes, which is basically reflection. In his open conversation video, he says at the beginning of it that he has talked to family, friends, co-workers, I believe, and professionals. I don't know if those are, professional ice cream shake makers, or if those are professional librarians, or if those are professional attorneys. I don't know who he's talking about, okay? He says professionals. I guess he assumes we're supposed to believe that that means therapists, but that doesn't necessarily... He could say professionals, and that couldn't be the case. He never once says, I talked to a counselor or a therapist and went to therapy for this. He never once in any of those videos comes out and says that. So he must say it to her in this article because she cites it, okay? But he does say, the fallout became deeply personal when his younger brother, who works as a model in New York City, stopped talking to him because of the allegations. It's now been 2 years since they last spoke, Charles says. Okay, so you're minimizing the allegations in this article. People minimize his allegations all the time, but his own brother hasn't talked to him in 2 years? Makes you wonder what his own brother knows behind the scenes, or what his own brother thinks about this. Why would your own brother not talk to you if there was no truth to this whatsoever? And he says in there that he can prove it. So if you can prove it, why would your own brother have issues with... that is confusing to me, okay? Makes me very sad that you don't have a relationship with your brother, because you were very close with your brother. It makes me really sad, right? But then it makes you wonder, is there even more behind the scenes that we're not aware of? Okay. So then she goes on and says, treading a well-worn scandal path, which, by the way, in his video, Open Conversations, he says not to refer to this as a scandal because it is way too serious and that it should never be referred to as scandal. By the way, at the 21-minute mark here, I should probably note this is going to be a very long video, okay? So I have lots of notes from his videos as well. Treading a well-worn scandal path, Charles spent the next few months mostly offline doing a lot of self-reflection and conferring with mental health professionals. Now, he must have told her this because he never mentions that in any video. Now, why he would mention that to an article, to a journalist on an article 2 to 3, 4 years later, but never mention in a video, why he wouldn't want people to know that he was talking to a therapist to help him get through this, that would have actually, I think, been a pertinent issue that people would have been like, wow, James Charles is taking this seriously. He's talking to a therapist about it. Why you waited 4 years to come out and talk about this? I'd like to see some proof of those therapy sessions, James, okay? To just throw that out in an article. And while a couple of months may seem like a laughably short time for a break, to Charles, having no stage felt like an endless punishment. I'm sorry, James. I'm sure that the two underage young men that you were talking to, that the trauma that they're going to have to deal with for the rest of their lives, like the victims of Colleen Ballinger, they felt that they were being a little bit punished too about all of this, okay? I am absolutely effing hating it, he says. I am somebody who likes to be busy all the time. I love filming. Having nothing to do drove me insane. In the summer of 2021, Charles prepared a comeback video, a 30-minute YouTube post titled An Open Conversation, which began with the acknowledgement that it would be ridiculous and irresponsible to try to come back to social media and pretend like nothing happened. Then he goes on to say, she says, romantic relationships will become a whole other challenge, one that ultimately led to the incidents, he says, the incidents, which they capitalize. You mean that grooming allegations? Because he was talking to let's call it for what it is if you're a journalist, okay? He was had allegations of grooming underage minors, which by your website definition from RAINN can be online, okay? So yes, they are affirmed allegations that he himself took accountability for in his holding accountability video. It's not the incident, okay? And as a journalist, you're minimizing and diminishing the victim's stories. And I'm so tired of this, okay? It's disgusting. Finding dating prospects in the rarefied influencer celebrity strata he eventually vaulted into was tough. Quickly, please name 5 famous male gay celebrities from the ages of 20-25, he says. You can't because they don't exist. Okay, James, how about Troye Sivan, Chris Colfer, Joey Graceffa, Lucas Cruikshank, Lil Nas, Noah Schnapp, Dan Levy. Dan Levy was 18 when he came out. Kit Connor or Sam Smith when he was 18 when he came out. That was pretty quick. I could probably name 20 more if you want me to. How about the cast of Heartstopper on Netflix? Kit Connor and his co-star. I mean, there's a lot of people, okay, in Hollywood, and they aren't taken to DMs for meeting people, all right? Now, I know that you learned that whole tactic from your good GD Jeffree Star, who met his partner through DMs. You told me that, okay, when I asked you back in the day, and I said, it seems to me like you want a relationship like Jeffree Star, where you meet a straight person online, okay, and he goes, that's absolutely 100% what I want. You said that, okay? So I'm sorry that you learned that from Jeffree Star, and apparently that worked for Jeffree Star with Nathan. It doesn't work for you, okay? You were the one that came out in a video and said that your For You page is not a dating app, that you weren't going to be on those things. And yet in this article, you say, again, that you're in DMs talking to people. He says that in here, okay? I mean, it's baffling to me. So the internet, once again, he says, became an avenue for exploration. He started using TikTok's For You and Instagram's Explore pages as dating apps, as many people his age do, but admittedly ignored the pitfalls. I know, you know, and he knows that Charles is on a mission to rehabilitate his reputation. But even though we've already established he's very good at his job, I have to tell you that his regret doesn't come across in person as the opportunistic artifice so many celebrities begrudgingly wade through. Or is that your opinion, okay, of what he seems like in person in an interview in Cosmopolitan, a huge magazine, okay, that he knows is going to get a huge attention? It's more that he just seems young. Okay, well, how about his victims? Okay, that you victim blamed in here and said that they wouldn't do an interview with you unless you paid him. They're 20 years old. They're the age that he was when he was doing this crap. But you're giving him a defense? What about his victims? Are you kidding me? Not that everyone in his position would have the luxury of being perceived as naive or guileless. This comeback would look a lot different if Charles were not as physically beautiful white man. Are you kidding me? Okay, well, there you're talking about his privilege is what you're talking about as a beautiful white man. I don't necessarily think that way, but apparently you do, which shows your bias towards James Charles, okay? He's more cautious now, although not so much that he's given up on the DM sliding completely. This part is unreal, okay? Instead, he started requiring potential romantic interest to provide IDs before he'll engage. I'm a club bouncer at this point, he says. Which even still hasn't stopped the occasional breach of trust. Earlier this year, a TikToker even shared snippets of a flirtatious conversation he had with Charles in which Charles outlines his requirements for a boyfriend. Charles also tells me he recently caught a 17-year-old trying to lie about his age by taking out a digit on his ID. Well, James, you are the person that said that you were not going to talk to people in DMs anymore, okay? And she also didn't do her research because James Charles last summer came out and said he was looking for his soulmate to submit your application to his DMs on Instagram. Then came out later and said he couldn't believe how many people were contacting him through his DMs, okay? If your problem is that you're in DMs talking to people that are lying about their age, stop talking to people in DMs. You came out and said your For You page wasn't a dating app. Stop doing it, okay? And here you are self-admittedly acting like you haven't changed. You're admitting that you haven't changed in this video or in this article. You're telling the reporter, the journalist, okay, who didn't do her research because she would know that you had come out in a video and said that your For You page wasn't a dating app. Those were your exact words, okay? She would know that had she watched the video that was 15 minutes long. I just sat out here and watched it with my neighbor walking her dog back and forth. I watched it and did my research. Why this journalist, the award-winning journalist, couldn't do her research to throw that in your face and say, well, you're still in DMs, James, because these are the questions I would ask if I was the journalist. So you're still in DMs, James, with people, but you said in your video, open conversation, that your For You page wasn't a dating app. You also said that in your holding myself accountable video, okay, that you shouldn't have been contacting people through DMs, yet you're still contacting people through DMs. Oh, and last summer you said you were looking for your soulmate to submit an application to your DM. So I'm confused, James. What have you really learned? But she doesn't ask those questions because she didn't do her research. Okay. In our own messy, imperfect way, maybe we're starting to calibrate our responses to the severity of an offender's offense. Maybe we've arrived at the point where we're doling out inappropriate levels of social censure. Or maybe we're just tired of keeping score and ready to succumb to the path of least resistance, letting our feeds figure it out for us. And yes, I absolutely agree with you. That's exactly what it is. We're letting our feeds figure it out for us. We're letting people manipulate who should be popular and who shouldn't, and who should be held accountable and who shouldn't, okay? And you're part of the problem because you're allowing through your article, which if you guys read this whole article, you'll be absolutely disgusted by this, okay? She wants to cite this article, she wants to cite this video of James Charles talking about in this open conversation video, and then she wants to give all these excuses away for he's a new person, he's a changed person, and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. Let me show you a screenshot at the beginning of James Charles' open conversation video. It says right here, trigger warning, conversation about sexual assault. Who's sexual assault? James Charles' sexual assault is what he's talking about, okay? James Charles. He puts a trigger warning at the beginning of his holding myself accountable video, okay? He did that. So when you go into this article and you read this article that is so bizarre to me, I mean, there are so many different parts in here that I didn't even read to you guys that are, I mean, this very interview is to be a trial balloon. Its reception, the answer to the question both of us, and maybe you too, if want to auto-populates in Google search can be believed, are here to ask, is James Charles still canceled? He should be, but people like you that are giving him redemption arcs are the part of the problem, okay? After all, a would still ousted person be allowed to pose for red carpet cameras at the People's Choice Awards? This is going to stop. Hold on a second. Okay, this is the part for me where I was like, these are people that are part of the problem, okay? And you, the journalist, you are part of the problem. After all, would a still ousted, canceled, or still ousted person be allowed to pose for red carpet cameras at the People's Choice Award, or chat amicably with paparazzi while out and about in Hollywood? She's using that as a defense, is that he's not canceled anymore. Let's examine why he's not canceled. Would a still banished person have hundreds of thousands of fans enthusiastically engaged with his YouTube beauty tutorials? Why? Because like you and your friends, they forgot, because he played this whole narrative, okay, that I didn't do anything wrong. Why? We're going to get to that in a second, okay? Would a truly exiled person be 24 years old and living in a reportedly $7 million farmhouse that looks like a cross between the homes featured in the latter seasons of Vanderpump Rules and any season of all of iterations of the Kardashians? You know, black and white modern exteriors, hyper-organized interiors. When I arrived, I noticed Oreo decanted into glass jars on a pristine marble kitchen island, a display technique first popularized by Khloe Kardashian back when Charles was still in high school. Girl, what does that have anything to do with the fact that James Charles had allegations about grooming that he took responsibility for, and said that he was talking inappropriately to two minors, that he didn't check their age? Why do you care, girl, that he is living in a house that looks like the Kardashians, or that he has Oreos stacked in a glass jar? What is that about? That has any appropriate place in this article whatsoever? Are you a journalist? Seriously? Are you a journalist, or are you a fan? That's my question, okay? There's a lot writing on this answer. You're right, there is, and here it is. Painted, a solo venture 4 years in the making, launches in just a few weeks. People have speculated that I have partners or investors, which I don't know how that rumor got started. Oh, probably because you're good Judy Jaclyn Hill, because you just went to Michaela Nogueira's party, and we know you're friends with Jaclyn Hill, okay? Because Jaclyn Hill said that she funded her own cosmetics brand, Jaclyn Cosmetics, and yet we find out all these years later that that was a total scam and that she was never the CEO, CFO, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and also your ties to Morphe back in the days. So yes, I think it's a fair question to ask whether or not you're really putting all your money in there. Plus, you're not making as much money as you used to, so you're putting all of your hard-earned money into a makeup line, which this journalist doesn't discuss, and say that the number one thing he's coming out with, okay, which are these, he puts them on her hand, takes her into his basement. I can tell you right now, James Charles would be taking nobody that I know into their basement, okay? But she talks about how he puts these creams. She doesn't say anything about how the fact that Lady Gaga already came out with these, that many other brands have come out with these things 10 or 15 years later. Okay, but this innovative new brand that James Charles is launching, that he's put all of his money into, his first product launch is something that 20 other people have come out with, okay? Give me a break. So then he goes on to say, she goes on here to explain that, where was this at? That she goes on to explain how, he says he couldn't get into any of these things, but that, his PR team, he hired a PR team. Where is this part? He hired a PR team, and that they like pushed and pushed and pushed to get him into these things, and they couldn't get into these things, but then finally they started letting up. It seems like everyone in my life under the age of 25 considers Charles an internet celebrity, and no one under 45 has ever heard of him unless they have kids. That's exactly right, okay? That's exactly right. So let's look at James Charles' age demographic. Under 25 or kids. Thank you for affirming that. Those in the former group know that he's been famous since his teen years, although his storylines, so to speak, are all self-produced, okay? And then it goes on, and he talks in here about how he got famous, and with the ring light, which we all know was faked now, and all this kind of stuff. Then she refers to these apologies for things like the Africa and Ebola, which she talks about. I'm like, those were pretty serious situations, okay? Those were ignorant tweets that he put out to just kind of write off. And then she says, at least one rival, it should be said, interpreted differently. His Dramageddon opponent initially accused Charles of using his fame to manipulate straight men. True to influence reform, she reacted the claim and apologized a year later. Hold on a second. This is the part that I need to read to you. Charles developed a reputation for kind of over-the-top thirstiness, a quality that could be interpreted as refreshingly candid or slightly cringe, depending on who you ask. At least one rival, it should be said, interpreted it differently. His Dramageddon opponent initially accused Charles of using his fame to manipulate straight men. True to influencer form, she retracted the claim and apologized a year later. Yet all the drama seemed to ultimately earn him one thing: more followers. At his peak, Charles had nearly 26 million YouTube subscribers. He doesn't anymore. On top of tens of millions more on TikTok and Instagram. That was all before, though. In February 2021, at age 21, Charles confronted a crisis career he couldn't quickly apologize for. I guess he was 21 at the time. He was publicly accused of sending lewd photographs and inappropriate sexual messages to a then 16-year-old fan. Charles says he was misled into believing the boy was 18 and that he blocked him as soon as he learned the truth. I've never been more disgusted in my life when I found out that kid was 16 years old, which he says in the video that he could have done with a quick research, okay? The allegations trigger more complaints and goes on about all these different allegations that he had, and she goes on, calls them scandals, even though he says in his video it should never be referred to as a scandal, which she would know had she even watched the video, okay? In the end, substantiated or not, multimedia reports indicate that at least 15, okay, and I'm not going to talk about that because I'm going to only talk about the two parts. Then she goes on to talk about the Holding Myself Accountable video, and this is when she talks about, but another former accuser wrote back via DMs, and this is where she talks about the person, and this is where she says, if a celebrity with tens of millions of followers came flying to your DMs, would you respond? I probably would. That's what she says, okay, defending him, which he says in his video that he never reached out to them, that they reached out to him first, okay, which is a very important point, because what that says is that James Charles never had to respond, okay? So if she had watched the video, she would know that what he says in there was they always reached out to him first, okay? That's in the video. I just watched the video. So he never reached out to these people first is what he's saying, okay? So, which is interesting to me that he calls his For You page a dating app, because then how are you finding these people to reach? I don't know. I'm very confused about all this, okay? Which is where James Charles picks and chooses what he says in the past and takes down videos and all this kind of stuff, okay? In the absence of hard evidence, hordes of commenters and bystanders glommed onto the idea that Charles was creepy, irresponsible at best, possibly predatory at worst. Okay, first of all, hard evidence. The hard evidence was him coming out and saying that he did it. I don't know what you need more than a told in a video confirmation of his own allegations. I'm not really sure what more hard evidence than that you need, okay? But apparently, you're okay with this. So it goes on. She talks about him being, you know, that his YouTube page was demonetized. I read all that, okay, and everything. He can't even explain how hard that week was for him and all this kind of stuff. He thinks he's always been somebody that has been able to cope, and it goes on, talks about all this kind of stuff. She says in here something to the effect of that she didn't even remember who Toddy Westbrook was, or something like that, which I thought, that's interesting. So you were watching for James Charles, you didn't remember who the rest of the people were. And then she talks about it becoming his most unliked video. The article is just so poorly done, okay? I mean, from the fact that we continue to say, when James Charles uses this as an example of, like, list, you know, 25, you know, list 5 YouTuber or 5 celebrities under the age of 25 that are gay and out, okay? A quick Google search, which I did, will help you find 30, okay? But like Tyler Oakley came out when he was young, Troye Sivan came out when he was young, okay? Was just in The Idol, was a singer, okay? Joey Graceffa came out when he was young, okay? Maybe not 18, but young. I came out when I was 18, all right? You know, I mean, like, this is so mind-blowing to me. Dan Levy came out when he was 18. Sam Smith came out when he was 18. Lil Nas just came out. He's 24. Okay? Do you hear any of these people having allegations of being in DMs with people, talking about them, hitting them up? So, one of the things that's mystifying to me is that, you know, especially James Charles in his Open Conversation video, he does a pride, and this is something that I caught watching it. I mean, I knew that before, but this time around, I'm sitting there watching it with different eyes, and he does this pride look, this eyeshadow look, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, you are a 24-year-old adult gay man that is out and proud, okay, with a huge fan base. You could be such a role model to the youth, okay, to the LGBTQIA plus youth. You could be such a role model. And instead, this is the route that you choose to go, right? Not to mention that in his video, Open Conversation, he says in there, I believe, hold on a second, let me get to my notes, which I have right over here. He says in here something to the effect of, No, this is in his Holding Myself Accountable video, that he's always wanted to date someone his age or older. Well, why is it that everybody that you're reaching out to, which she would know had she done her research on the article, again, by watching these videos, because I took notes, so she could have watched a video, one's 30 minutes, one's 15 minutes, it would have taken her 45 minutes as a Emmy Award-winning journalist to watch the videos and actually do her research to ask him the appropriate questions based on these videos, okay? He says in the video that he always wanted to date someone that was older. Well, he was 21 when these allegations came out. He was 21, it says, okay? So if that were the case, why are you talking to people that are 18 that are having to show you IDs? I thought you wanted to date somebody older, James. You said that in your video. Older to me would be 21, 22, 25, 30. That wouldn't be somebody that was 18 years old. That's younger than you, okay? Now, I know you didn't go to college, but you basically probably took basic math in high school. Okay, apparently you were a very good student. You showed us the whole video with Tati Westbrook about where it's more affordable for a company to do a sponsored video with an influencer like you and pay you large sums of money than actually do a commercial. So you can do math. We know that. When it benefits you to make money, we know you can do math, right? Okay, so if that's the case, can you do math from 21 minus 18 means younger than you? Even if they are legal? Okay, so how you can come out in a video and say you've always wanted to date somebody that was older than you, then you would think that anybody that came forward that said that they were 18 or 19, you wouldn't have any interest in them either. Okay? We're not talking just about, so anybody that comes out that's under the age of 24 at this point, you've always wanted to date somebody older than you, why are you still messing with people that are younger than you? Okay? You can't, this is where you pick and choose what you think is the truth. You were 21 at the time, okay? So, probably 20 at the time you're doing this, talking to people, even if they were 16 years old, okay, not to minimize their story, but even if they were and they lied and said they were 18, you said you want to date somebody younger. Why are you talking to 18-year-olds talking about buying them plane tickets to fly them out there and things like that because they don't have money? Girl, your stories don't add up, okay? And yet this researcher, when you read the whole article, just trust me, go to Cosmopolitan and read this article. You will be blown away by how many excuses this author gives James Charles to come out of his cancellation, okay? What she should have named the article was, would you please uncancel James Charles? I'm asking you personally, is what she should have named the article, okay? So I go in and I watch this Holding Myself Accountable video, and I want to address a few things, okay? So first of all, he takes accountability for it, right? Then he goes in and says he will explain the work that he's done, which he never does. He just says that he's reflected and found out that he's desperate. He never talks about seeing a counselor in there, which she talks about in his article. I don't know why, or her article, I don't know why he decided to come out 4 years later and talk about seeing a counselor when he never has mentioned it before, ever. He's never mentioned it, to my understanding, before, right? And definitely not in these two videos. That's where he said, then he comes out and says he wanted to date somebody that was older than him. He talks about the power imbalance, but then says that they reached out to him first, okay? So it's kind of like he's talking about the power imbalance of I'm a celebrity and I have a lot of power, but they reached out to me first. Okay, well, you never had to respond to them, okay? Then he goes on, he goes, you can upload an actual apology video, but the only way to show it is through action, okay? Well, James, you said in the article, the journalist quotes you on this, okay, and uses it as a defense to show that you've changed. She uses it as a defense to show that you've changed, that you are now asking for IDs, and it even uses an excuse of how somebody tried to trick you by taking one digit out of their identification. Okay, so what you did in there was you came out and admitted that you're still in DMs talking to people, okay? She even says that in her article, right? But you came out in your video and said that your For You page is not for talking to people. You came out a year ago and said to reach out to you if you thought that you were their soulmate, or they were your soulmate, okay? So no, you haven't learned, okay? And you later talk about patterns, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. Then you say in there that you now realize that your For You page is not a dating app. Okay, that was 4 years ago. You're still talking to people in your DMs, so I don't think you have learned that, okay? And then you say to the victims, you say the word victims in your video, I am so, so sorry, okay? You say to the victims, I am the victims of what? The lies? The manipulation? The rumor mill, like Colleen Ballinger says? Who are you saying sorry to? The victims. You said it, okay? So when this author wants to come out and say that there's no hard evidence, you said in your video, I am so, so sorry to the victims. So, Miss Journalist, there is your hard evidence that you apparently didn't need, okay? In the open conversation video, he puts at the beginning of it the trigger warning conversation about sexual assault. He also does that at the beginning. He says a trigger warning at the beginning of his holding myself accountability video. He talks about the importance of his first video, which he took down, okay, but continues to reference and talk about the importance of it, and apologize again to the victims. There's more hard evidence for you, and should have done his research, he says. Again, he basically reiterates what he says in his holding himself accountable video, okay? So he's now said it twice, all right? But she needs hard evidence. Okay. He says, scandal is not the appropriate word because it's too serious. But she uses scandal throughout her entire article. Okay. He says he spent 2 years changing the way he dated men. You did? So, you used to meet men on DMs in your For You page, and you're still talking to men and DMs, young men, okay, and asking them, I mean, if somebody is young enough that you have to ask for their ID, and then that would seem to me that you really haven't changed the way that you're dating men, so that's a damn lie. Okay, he said he met people on Tinder that were 18 or 19 that were lying and he stopped talking to them. Well, I'm confused, okay? Because if you were talking to men that were 18 or 19 on Tinder, didn't you say that you wanted to date somebody that was older than you? So in that video, you were 22 at the time. You had just come out and said it was your 22nd birthday. Okay, so at the time you were 22. Now, I don't know, like again, if you don't know how to do math, but 19 or 18 would be younger, okay? You were 22 at that time. So 23, 24, 25, 26, that would have been older. I'm just trying to help you out here, James, okay, to get your story straight. Because when you talk about patterns that people are talking about, this is what they're talking about. You say, I'm not attracted to younger people, okay? It's not a pattern for me. I don't talk to people in DMs, but then you come out again in 2023 and say you're talking to people in DMs asking for their IDs, but then you say you always wanted to date somebody older than you, but you're talking to 18 and 19-year-olds at 22, and you're still asking people at 24 for their IDs. You're obviously attracted to younger guys, okay? And that's okay. You're 24. 21 is younger, okay? Date a 21-year-old, or date a 22-year-old, or a 23-year-old, okay? Why you're 24 and still asking people for IDs means it's very speculative whether or not they're not 18 years old, okay? Do I think that's problematic? Yes, I do. I think that's worrisome, okay? And I think it's even more worrisome that 4 years have gone by and you are self-admitting this in an article and you don't see a problem with it to this day, okay? So then he goes on and into a lengthy explanation of all of the fake allegations. And she actually references Deaf Noodles in her article. She says another YouTuber that's being held accountable for these things, and she links Deaf Articles, an article that Cosmopolitan talked about. Cosmopolitan seems to really be on the side of James Charles. It's very interesting to me. So, just like TMZ is on the side of Colleen Ballinger. So don't think that these people out there that are celebrities, and you want to talk about the power differential, that they don't have people on the inside working for them, okay? Because this article was a complete damage control job for James Charles, and she should be embarrassed that she wrote this article, okay? Do I think that the article mentioned most of what needed to be mentioned? Yes. But then she comes out and defends him a lot, right? Or makes excuses in his own words. She allows him to use excuses and doesn't go in and counter it by asking him the appropriate questions, which a good journalist would do, okay? So then he goes in and talks about these he talks about these fake allegations and what, okay? But my question is, but what about the true ones? Let's just talk about the two true ones that you talked about and said that you held yourself accountable for them and called them victims and said you're so sorry to the victims. What about those two stories, okay? I'm not talking about all the fake ones. All right? And, you know, in all honesty, like, I've always said this, that with fake allegations, when they come out, they diminish the true stories of the true victims, right? But this is James Charles' opportunity in this video, like he did in the article, when they talked about it again, to say there were so many fake allegations that came out, okay? So people see this as a pattern because there were now 20 allegations instead of 2. Well, I still think 2 is problematic, that you were talking to 2 different people under the age of 18 that you hadn't checked, which you said was your fault, their ages, and had inappropriate conversations with them. And yet today, you still haven't changed your behavior of how you're dating men. You're still talking to them in DMs. So, no, this is a James Charles problem, okay? This is not an internet problem. But yes, I do believe that the fake allegations take away from the true stories of the victims, okay? And that's why it's a problem when people come out with fake stories. And we need to focus on the truth. So then he goes on and says that people keep saying there's a pattern. There is a pattern, James, okay? You go for men that are 18 years old, you still talk to people in your DMs, and I feel like you've learned nothing, okay? From this article that you claimed these things, and from the 2 videos that I just watched. Then you go on and you say in this video that the entertainment and the tea is more fun. Which is really interesting to me because your good Judy that you defended, Colleen Ballinger, she just said that in her video not too long. But we're having fun, right? She said that in her video. Is this like the go-to for all of you problematic YouTubers that have sexual grooming allegations? That when people accuse you of this or come out, even though you were in a video where you held yourself accountable and said you were sorry to the victims, that you say, but the tea and the entertainment is more fun? No, none of your victims are having fun having to come out and publicly talk about this. This is probably why they didn't want to do an interview unless they were compensated in an article about it, right? Because why would they want to relive having to be publicly shamed and have people come for them? Adam McIntyre and all of the other victims that are coming out and telling their stories on a constant basis, you know, are just being belittled and demeaned and having nasty things said to them. And many of them are not being compensated whatsoever because they're just sharing their stories via Twitter. Why would somebody want to get on a scale of Cosmopolitan and share their stories and have people come out and accuse them of the things that people are saying about Adam McIntyre and the rest of those people? Are you kidding me? As a journalist, you're not doing your job, okay? By putting that person in there and basically victim blaming them is what you're doing, okay? It's unbelievable to me. Then he goes on and on about his desperate need to have a boyfriend. So, I just want to tell you something, James, and I know this video has gone on long enough now, but I can remember being about, I don't know, 25 or 26, well, I guess I was 27, and I had just gotten out of my first long-term relationship, was 4.5 years. And I remember my mom and I were watching an episode of Jerry Springer. I've shared this in a lot of videos. Y'all can go and fact-check this, okay? And unless you've ever heard this, in case you've ever heard this story before, put in the comment section below. I've heard that story before. I share my stories over and over again. So my mom and I were sitting here at this condo that I live in now. It was my mom's condo. We were watching an episode of Jerry Springer. And there were 2 men that were fighting over this woman, right? And I said to my mom, I don't understand why I can't find a boyfriend, okay? And I'll never forget what my mom said to me. My mom at the time was 51 years old. She had, you know, just, well, I don't know how old she was at that point, but she had been sober for a couple years. I was sober. We were having, you know, conversation about dating and things like that. My mom and I always had honest conversations about dating. My mom dated a few times, but was never with another partner from the point that my dad and her divorced, okay? And my mom looked at me and she said, you know, she said, you have a pretty fantastic life. She said, none of us in life are promised a partner, okay? And if you're lucky enough to find love once, that's a huge blessing. But some of us may never find a partner. Some of us may never fall in love. So be grateful for what you have. And I can remember thinking that at that time, leaving there and being like, my mom has never been in love since she and my dad got divorced. You know, and she's not hung up on this idea. Yeah, she would have loved to have had a companion or a partner, but she wasn't hung up on it. It wasn't like she was going to desperate, your words, measures, okay, to have a partner in her life. And the thing is, James, is that you live in a house that the journalist says is much like the Kardashians with glass jars of Oreos. You don't ever have to worry about anything financially again. You're getting ready to start your own makeup line. So don't cry me a river about how difficult it is to be 24 years old, gay, young, in Hollywood. You could be going out with your friends, having a good time. You could be going and doing this. You could be traveling the world. You could be doing all these kinds of things. You're starting your own makeup line, and you want to complain about how you don't have a partner. Do you know how many people in the world that work 2 and 3 jobs, have chronically medical illnesses, that have huge issues in their life, toxic family members, toxic friends, can't pay their bills, and have never been in love in their life or had a partner, and you want to cry a river and use that as an explanation for why you need to dip into somebody's DMs and ask for their identification? Give me an effing break. Are you kidding me? I cannot. I absolutely cannot that we are still in 2023 using this as an explainable defense for James Charles and what he did 4 years ago. And yet again, in this video, he never talks about seeing a counselor or anything. So I don't know where she got that. He must have said that to her and thrown it out there, right? Where's the proof? I want to see the proof, okay? I want to see the receipts of that is what I want to see. Because I don't know that I believe that. I don't see that there's been any work done. I don't see to this day, by your actions, you came out and said that you're talking to people in their DMs and asking for IDs. You said you weren't going to do that anymore. You said a year ago that you were asking for your soulmate in your DMs. You said you weren't going to do that anymore, you know? You continue to lie. Your stories don't match up. She didn't do her research. She didn't ask you the appropriate questions based on 2 videos that you have out there.
I would have asked those questions if I was a journalist. And I'm not an Emmy Award-winning journalist. I'm not a journalist at all. Don't put that on me. I'm a drama channel. I'm a commentary channel. I'm a tea gossip channel. And no, this is not fun for me. This makes me very, very sad. Because I am a believer that lessons repeat themselves until they are learned. And this lesson has not been learned. So the fact that it will continue to be repeated is truth to me. It just hasn't come out yet. James, I wish you all the best. I would love nothing more for you to be able to get in a video and say, I have been working with a therapist for the last 2 years. These are the things that we have been working on, that for some reason, because of me being bullied in high school, and I'm just pulling this out of my ass. I'm going to put $1 in the cuss jar today. But because of being bullied in high school or whatever, I need acceptance from young men. I need acceptance from men that are straight acting, because those are the types of people that bully me. I'm just throwing that out. You know, or I need acceptance from men because of this, or whatever, and I need validation, you know, and I realize that I'm a love addict, and so I'm constantly, you know, approaching people with this. I mean, there are so many things that you could be working on, okay? I mean, you are asking people literally for pictures of their armpit hair, okay? That in itself is called a fetish. You could be working with a therapist. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Love armpit hair all you want, okay? But not everybody does. So there's a reason why you are that way. If you worked with a therapist, you might be learning that and why you have this need to be constantly in love and do it in secretive DM kind of ways, because that's kind of, that alone, that need to have these private conversations. You even said in your video that I want to have this Hannah Montana fantasy where I take off the makeup and I'm James Dickinson, okay? That's an issue you need to be working with with a therapist. You could work through these issues, you know? I don't want James Charles to suffer. I don't want any victims to suffer. But you got to do the work to work through this stuff, okay? And getting in an article and asking to not be canceled anymore is not the way through. Okay? You got to work through the pain, through the heart issues, and do the actual work. Or nothing is going to change. Anyway, let me know what you think about all of that in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.